I think certainly, this whole area of disclosure of relationships is key. And most of the rules that apply, whether that's in arbitration or in court actions, whether that be the IBA rules on taking evidence and international arbitration, for instance, I think it's Article 5, Rule 2A and B. If you look at those provisions, there is an obligation on the expert to disclose. And that makes perfectly good sense. That is reflected in the CIR protocol. It's also reflected in the civil procedure rules in England and Wales. It's reflected in the DIFC rules and in Qatar, similarly in Singapore, international court rules, the same idea. And it is about disclosure. It's about openness and being able to place in front of the tribunal and the other party what relationships you actually have, either with the parties, their lawyers, or the tribunal itself. And that transparency early on is actually incredibly important. And at the moment, if you don't do that, that obviously goes to bias or a perception of bias. And that's the biggest area that seems to be impacting on experts and their credibility. Roughly there is at least one case a month at the moment being published in criticizing experts in different jurisdictions and court actions, all revolving around either bias or the perception of bias. And a lot of that comes back to a lack of disclosure or appropriate disclosure. And that you're obviously much better placing that out there early and doing it as quickly as possible, so that there is often it is actually met with no response. I'll give you an example. I sat in a court action in the Singapore International Commercial Court. So it's subject to the Supreme Court rules, and those provisions actually are very similar to CPR. They're exactly the same as the IBA rules, for instance, same requirement that you disclose. Now, that was a panel of 3 judges on that bench, 2 of which relationship is perhaps a strong word to say. 2 of them sit on the Academy of Experts Judicial Committee. So the Judicial Committee is involved in providing guidance for experts in different aspects of the fields that they work in. And as a consequence of my being chairman during the period that they were publishing certain of that guidelines, there was a relationship. I disclosed that in my report. Nobody took exception to it. Now, that's 2/3 of the bench sitting within this case. And interestingly, what happened when we got to the expert witness conferencing, the 3rd judge actually led that conferencing. So in essence, those 2 that there was a connection with stepped back from directly leading the expert witness conferencing. And that made perfectly good sense. And because that was disclosed early, there was nothing there that the party opposite could take exception to. It didn't give them any ammunition just to create mischief with or anything else. And similarly, the declaration that you have acted for or been appointed by a particular law practice 4 times previously, or you have been appointed opposite that law practice 3 times previously, that transparency, if it is out there, usually takes away any suggestion of inherent bias, because it becomes very, very difficult for you to pin something to that. So the rules require experts disclose. And I cannot understand for the life of me why they do not.